Yeah, it's a bit noisy.
Excuse me. Yeah, ask them to be quieter, yeah.
Okay, welcome everyone to what is the final session of the second day of the ICSA virtual conference. My name is Anton and I'll be the session chair. I wanted to introduce the session. Up front, I'll say that I know Vincent. We've been at ICSA conferences more than once before, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to introduce him and introduce this session. I'm hoping that it'll be something, an unforgettable session, really interesting and challenging for us all. Just to say that Vincent is a board member of ICSA. He's been a co-worker at the Camphill Community Glencraig in Northern Ireland since 1983, and he's got a wide range of experience supporting international volunteers and is the volunteer coordinator at Glencraig. This workshop is based on work he's been doing over the last few months with a group of international volunteers and people employed at Glencraig. This work is based on the outcomes that matter approach that Vincent has been using for a number of years with the international volunteers who live at Glencraig. In the workshop, we are joined by people from Glencraig at Caspar Hauser Hall and people online through Zoom. Over to you, Vincent.
Thank you, Anton. So good evening, everybody, or good morning, because we have some people joining from New Zealand. And I'm here in Caspar Hauser Hall, and I just have to say something to the people in Caspar Hauser Hall. So this is being recorded, so you have to just be careful with the conversation, because if you're having a conversation at your table, people can hear it, and it gets very distracting for everybody, yeah? So Martin?
Can I put this on you?
Yeah, okay. So it's nice to see everybody. And I'll just share my screen. Hold on a moment, just.
Well, Dan.
Hey, Anton, if I could interject, we just need you in.
I've just done it. Just done it, Steve.
And the hosting over.
Just done it, Steve.
Sorry, just. Okay. So as Anton mentioned, then this workshop is based on work I've been doing here at Glencraig with some of the volunteers and some of the people who are employed about nurturing positive relationships between people from diverse cultural backgrounds. And it's based on the outcomes that matter work that I've been using for a number of years at Glencraig, mainly with the international volunteers. Something. Just wait, the screen seems to be frozen. Good. So some people who are taking part in the Zoom meeting are familiar with Glencraig, but just for people who aren't so familiar with Glencraig, Glencraig is situated in Northern Ireland, a few miles outside Belfast. The community started in 1954. So we'll be celebrating our 70th anniversary this year. And at Glencraig, there's a school educating pupils with a learning disability. Some of the pupils live on site, but the majority attend daily. There's a residential community for adults with a learning disability, and some adults come in on a daily basis. There's approximately 100 people living at Glencraig, and about 330 people employed, which people like Miriam are probably very surprised having so many people employed at Glencraig now. The outcomes that matter, oh, screen, I don't know what's happening with the screen. It's good. That's working like that. So the outcomes that matter was created by Tom Garfat and Leon Fulcher, who were on the photo to the left. And Shane Murdoch is very involved now with taking a lead with the outcomes that matter. Shane is joined, I'm not sure if Leon is in the meeting as well. He's meant to be here, but hopefully he can come. So the OTM is primarily for people in a care setting, but Glencraig has adapted it to help people who are living or working at Glencraig to self-reflect on their learning experiences. There are two pillars that support the OTM framework. So the first is the Circle of Courage, and that's used in many educational, care and training situations around the world. And it's described in the book, Reclaiming Youth at Risk, by the authors mentioned in the screen. And the Circle of Courage, it comes from the First Nations people of North America, where in the human development, there were these four aspects of belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. So in Europe, there was probably a big emphasis on mastery and education, whereas with the Native Americans, there was these four aspects. So with belonging, that people belong to their family, their tribe, their people, and that, you know, when they were young, that they had a sense of belonging to their people. That was very important in their development. And then later on, they would learn skills, you know, like hunting, different skills they needed to learn. And then they became independent. And then later on, they could help other people through generosity. But with the Circle of Courage, it was very much that you didn't just develop one of these aspects. The four had to be developed simultaneously. The second pillar that supports the OTM is the ancestral home from the Maori people in New Zealand. So there's some similarities with the Circle of Courage, where physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being were nurtured. So the ancestral home and the Circle of Courage, they provides the framework for the OTM. And both these approaches, they're based on Indigenous wisdom from North America and New Zealand. But to this framework is added developmental outcomes that were identified in extensive research carried out at the end of the 20th, beginning of the 21st century, highlighting outcomes that were relevant to children and young people in out of home care situations. So there's three aspects to the OTM. The first is there would be an introduction looking at the highlight of the past week, any critical incidents or stressful situations, and contact with the birth family and significant others. The second stage, there's 20 developmental outcomes. So 5 outcomes are linked to belonging, 5 to mastery, 5 to independence, and 5 to generosity. And the third section reflects on the person's well-being in relation to belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. Glencraig has adapted the OTM. So one of the most important things is that it's for the volunteers in Glencraig to reflect on their learning experience when they're working in the houses or in the school or interacting with each other. And very often in the beginning, when people are doing the OTM evaluations, they mightn't write very much. There might be a question about their safety, and they might say, yes, I was safe. Whereas the whole approach with the OTM is to get them to say a bit more, to reflect on why they're safe. But it also provides the opportunity that the project coordinator can support the volunteers. And after they complete their OTM evaluation, I would have a conversation with them But if they didn't have that, I would just ask people how they are, and the response you very often get is fine. But by having the evaluation, you can look at things, you can address issues that maybe are coming up in the evaluation. The third part then is that it's very useful for the project coordinator providing information. And over the last few years in Glencraig, we had a number of European Solidarity Corps projects from the EU. And with all of these projects, we had to complete reports, and the information from the OTM was very helpful in completing the reports. And then finally, the OTM is used to nurture the virtues of gratitude, compassion, responsibility, peace, and kindness. Now, this wasn't included in the beginning when we were using the OTM. We focused more on belonging and mastery. And it was really during the pandemic of the 2020 where it sort of, very much highlighted the sort of importance of these areas. Like there was a lot in the UK about gratitude for care workers, showing compassion for people. So that's why it was sort of brought into the OTM. But it also links to something which Rudolf Steiner mentioned about the essential virtues for education. Steiner, who lived at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, he talked about gratitude being the most important virtue for children between birth and 7 years, love, which is very similar to compassion, from 7 to 14, and duty from 14 to 21. And Steiner has had quite a lot of influence in the development of Camphill. So with the OTM, the volunteers would complete 4 different evaluations. The first would be shortly after they arrive, within the first 2 months, reflecting on their experiences of coming to Glencraig, how that was for them, how they're looked after by other people, and how they're settling in. After that, they would complete one that would be focusing on stressful situations in their lives, so more biographical work to sort of look at, experiences they might have had in their life and the impact that has had on them. And then the third one would be after about 4 months, where they would focus on things that they've learned at Glencraig and what they still want to learn. And the final one would be after about 9 months, when they would complete an evaluation on their experiences at Glencraig. So all of the people who are involved in the review of the OTM that has been shared in this workshop, they completed 3 of the 4 evaluations. They didn't complete the one on their learning experience, the third one, but they completed the other 3. So this gives, so after the participants completed the OTM, they were involved in a review to share their experiences on completing it. So 17 participants were involved in this review. And in this slide, you can see how the participants rated the benefit of completing the introductory section. So they were asked to score between 0, not beneficial, and 10, beneficial, in relation to the 3 questions in the introductory section. And you can see the feedback is very positive. The lowest score with critical incidents is 7.4, but the other 2 are above 8. And here's some comments from the participants about completing the introductory section. I'm not going to read it out. I'll just give you a little bit of time to look at some of the remarks from the participants. And again, like there's some very positive comments. So this is 5 of the 17 comments which people had made. So this slide shows where the participants were from. The majority are from African countries. There was 3 from South America and the Caribbean and 2 from Europe. The majority of the participants who were in, so the majority were in Glencraig from 7 to 9 months. Or 7 to 12 months, and then one person less than 6 months, and then 2 over a year. 8 of the volunteers participated in the review, and 9 employees. And 2 of the employees had also been volunteers at Glencraig. So here are the questions then that the people reflected on in relation to the belonging outcomes. So there's a question on safety, positive communication, caring relationships. So belonging is very important for the international volunteers who live at Glencraig. You know, the importance of looking after each other, that they are safe, that they communicate positively with each other, and that they care for each other. And I think most people would agree that these 3 areas are very important with community living. There are 2 other questions connected with the belonging outcomes. Carer support, so group leaders, supervisors, the support they provide for the volunteers, and boundaries for daily living. So that could be all, you know, like the rules maybe from Glencraig that volunteers have to comply with. And as I mentioned before, you know, important aspect of the Glencraig OTM is that true belonging, gratitude is nurtured. So this is the response from the participants in relation to completing the section on belonging. And again, sort of very positive feedback that it's all above 8. And then some comments here from the participants about completing the belonging section. It's nice to read this. You think Glencraig's such a wonderful place reading this. There's no problems, yes, yeah. Okay, so here's where it's going to become maybe a bit technical. So we're going to divide into breakout rooms, and the people who are here in Casper Hauser Hall are going to have conversations at your table. So the idea is that when you go into the breakout room, you know, like have a conversation with the other people there, get to know them, and then have a conversation about how can we nurture gratitude. Now, I'm hoping some people have smartphones that they're not using for the presentation. And if you could take a photo of the QR code, then when you go into the breakout room, you could maybe share through Mentimeter the conversation in your group. Yeah? So if some people would like to take a photo of the QR code, if it doesn't work, don't worry about it too much. But in a few minutes, Zola will divide you into the breakout rooms. So Anton, how long do you think people should have in the breakout rooms? 5 minutes, maybe?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so Zola, whenever you want to set up the rooms, you can.
Shane's on his own there.
There's a bunch of people that says not joined. I'm not sure why, many of them say not joined. I'm not sure why that is. I'll just move him to room 2.
They just need to click and move into the room, no?
Yeah, normally it should pop up on their own screen that so either that they've left, their seat, you know what I mean? Like they're not sitting at their seat, they're off doing something, listening. I'm just gonna have to move people around, myself, because, some people are not joining.
Great. There we go.
Yeah.
One with
Yeah,
3 and
so
one with 4.
Yeah, room 1 is 2 people not joined, so they must have been people who got up from their seat.
No, one is
Um,
Vincent.
Oh, 1 is Vincent, sorry, yes, okay. So then there's Martin. Yeah. So I'll bring them back. I'll send a message, the broadcast message, a minute beforehand.
Great. Yeah, so we've got Adeline and Martin that are still with us here that haven't joined the group.
All right, okay. And who's the other one?
And the other one is Vincent.
Oh, just Vincent and Martin. Okay, that's fine.
Vincent,
Yeah.
Martin, and Adeline.
Okay. Yes, okay. All right,
And
so one
Vincent-
group is slightly bigger just because of the nature of me distributing people, but not knowing who wasn't going to be joining. Oh, well, that's all good. It's only a
fine.
5.
One with 3 and one with 4. I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, they have about 2-3 more minutes. I think that's the shortest breakout room I've ever heard. Usually in the groups we do, about 10 minutes minimum, just because, it gives everybody a chance to say at least a minute or 2.
Oh, look, we've got our responses here already that have popped up on the screen.
Oh, fantastic. Isn't that nice when that works? The tech like that is working. What's the QR code going to? What's the name of the app that you're using to capture the feedback?
It's called Mentimeter.
Menti?
MENTI.com. Menti.
Very good. I see. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Because I lead groups, but I haven't discovered that, and I like the idea of that QR code to capture things rather than people having to write it in there. And it just does it automatically rather than a note taker having to do it. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, I think I'm gonna send them usually when I close all rooms, it should give them a minute notice. That's the way it normally works. So I'm gonna close the breakout rooms now. Well, I push the close all rooms and then, well, let me tell them I'm gonna give them 1 more minute.
Can you hear us, Vincent? No, you can't.
Okay, so this should give them 60 seconds to start re-entering the main room. They could decide to stay the whole time until it cuts them off.
Yeah, they're starting to come back now.
Okay.
Oh, that third room got a lot bigger.
Yeah, no, it ended up being that way just because of the way I had to move people who hadn't joined, and figuring out who was where.
Mute the audio. Right. Can we go back? You want to hear them? Yeah, I do. Okay, maybe nobody's saying anything. Right.
Vincent, we're all back.
Good, okay.
You need to mute this. Oh, you're on.
I am unmuted. So sorry, just close.
Reflection or then regular?
Can you ask people to just be quiet now?
So reflection or
There'll be more breakout rooms coming later, yeah?
gentlemen, the online world is back with us. Hello, online world. Vincent, take it away.
So here are some of the comments that people have shared from the different conversations. Pardon? Don't know if I can. I don't want to get involved with that, yeah.
I can do it for you.
No,
Okay, that works.
but I need to see it. Okay.
Always move them down. Can I help you?
No,
Put them
sorry.
here for you?
Yeah, okay. Good. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Martin. Okay, so let's move on then. No, that doesn't quite.
Drag it even down.
I prefer, sorry, Martin, I preferred it back where it was. Yeah, that's better. Okay, sorry about that. So on this slide, then there are 3 questions connected to the mastery outcomes. The first is actively engaged in learning. The second about supportive environments, how people are supported. And the third one then about tutors and supervisors involved in learning, into learning involvement. There are 2 questions here in relation to mastery: motivation to achieve and making use of learning opportunities. So with the mastery outcomes, it's a lot about what people are learning in their work and what they're doing. But an important aspect is also about true mastery, nurturing compassion. And so this is how people benefit from completing the section on mastery. And again, like all of the scores are above 8.5. And here's some comments from the participants about completing the mastery section. So I'll just give you a bit of time to read out, it mentions about training and about what people have learned. So we're going to go into the breakout rooms again and have a conversation of how can we teach people to be compassionate. I'll just close that QR code there. So yeah, is that possible to teach people to be compassionate, and how do we do it? So Zola, if you could divide people into the breakout rooms, so maybe to have 3 rooms is probably enough, or people can go back into the same room that they were in before.
Sorry, Vincent, I already recreated just because it was, you
That's
know, the
not a-
numbers were uneven.
Okay, it's not a problem. Yeah.
So we've got two not joined. Okay. All right. All right. Everybody's evenly distributed now. There's at least two per room because Edeline hasn't joined, Martin hasn't joined, and yeah, Vincent is unassigned. So that's fine. We've got two,
Okay.
3,
Good.
and you wanted again 5 minutes?
5 minutes, I think.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
We're all back, Vincent.
So here's some feedback from the conversations. Somebody mentions about empathy. Okay. So here's 3 questions then in relation to the independence outcomes. Could you? So about planning and decision making, personal power and responsibility. And then 2 other questions about activity programs, hope for the future. And then with the independence outcomes, the volunteers are encouraged to nurture responsibility. So here's a record of how the participants rated the benefits of completing the questions on the independence outcomes. And again, you know, like it's very positive response. The lowest is activity program 7.8. And then some comments from the participants about completing this section. So here's some questions in relation to the generosity outcome, service to others, peaceful conflict resolution, caring. And then 2 other questions about honesty and high expectations. So as part of the OTM at Glencraig, the participants are encouraged to nurture peace and kindness through the generosity outcomes. I don't know if the volunteers are aware of that, are you? That you're to be peace and kind to each other, yes, and to other people. And here you have a mural on a wall in East Belfast, which is quite close to Glencraig, and it shows a Protestant boy and a Catholic girl, and there's a poem between them about no more. And the first line talks about no more bombing, no more murder. The rest of the poem refers to other situations that occurred during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So in Glencraig at present, there's 18 volunteers from 11 countries, and part of the volunteering project is about the volunteers getting on with each other and developing positive relationships. Here's a record of how the participants rated the benefit of completing the questions in relation to generosity. And again, very positive responses, high expectations, the lowest at 7.8. And here's some comments from the participants. So this is the last time to go into the breakout rooms. And when you go into the breakout rooms, if you can have a conversation of how can we nurture peace and kindness? And I think at this time, it's sort of very important to have this conversation about how we can nurture peace and kindness. So Zola, can you divide people up into the breakout rooms again?
Yes, I've just opened them all up.
Thank you. Is everybody back, Sola? Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's some comments from the different groups. So it's section 3 of the OTM, then there's the overall development, which is a summary of the other sections of the OTM. So with belonging, and here in the brackets is what you would have in your normal OTM or the standard OTM. Whereas with Glencraig, with belonging, it's reflecting on how people nurture gratitude, and with mastery, how they nurture compassion. But it's a summary of the previous outcomes. And then we have what's reflected on in relation to independence, and then with generosity. So here's a record of the participants, the benefit of completing the third section, and this is very positive. It's all above 8.9 for this section. And some comments then by the participants about completing this section. So here's a response from the participants of how they rated the experience of completing the final OTM evaluation. So there was 5 options that they could choose from, and you could see here that everybody's chosen either rather satisfied or very satisfied. The options which weren't chosen were neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, rather dissatisfied, and very dissatisfied. And then some comments from the participants about completing the final OTM. So the participants were also asked to reflect on which, with the different evaluations they completed. The first one, the one on trauma, which is very similar to the one on critical experiences people might have, and the final one. So how they rated them, again between 0, not beneficial, to 10, very beneficial. And it seems that the most beneficial one was the final one. And then some comments from the participants about the evaluation which they found most beneficial. And 2 people have sort of chosen the final one. 2 people chose the one on trauma. And then 1 person said the first one and the final one. Okay, so that's most of the presentation which I wanted to share. So now there's an opportunity if people have questions, or comments about the OTM or about the workshop or about Glencraig. So this is now an open session for people who are participating online, but also for people who are here in Glencraig. So there's a few different options. One is you can put comments on the Mentimeter if you want. The other is you can put things through the Zoom chat, or if you want to say something online, you could raise your hand and come up with a question.
And if you want to say something in the room, here is a second microphone so that the online world can also hear you.
I suggest that we leave up the code for a minute, and then we can you can turn off your screen share, and then we can see everyone.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Anton.
Okay, and I think you
So
can take your,
I'll stop sharing the screen then. Okay, good. So is anyone any questions? Mary?
I have a question. What do you do if and when you receive some difficult feedback through this form?
Well, it would be having a conversation with the person. So when when I'm going over the evaluation with the volunteers, maybe some issues come up that somebody's not happy about it, and we have a conversation to try to deal with the situation. Yeah. Yeah. Miriam?
Yeah, I was wondering how much are let's say, the house coordinator or the workshop leader or the teacher who are involved with the individual volunteers involved with the OTM and with also, well, reading the answers and discussing the maybe issues or good things. What's their involvement in that? Or because it seems to be or it sounds like you are the carrier of it and you do that work with them,
Yeah.
but does it go further?
It's an interesting question, Miriam. Like in the beginning, I sort of thought maybe it's something I shared with the with the house, with the group leaders and that. But then, like a lot of it was very private. And even the last time we had an ICSA conference, I shared some of the feedback from the volunteers, but it's very personal stuff. And it was actually better doing it like this for this session, where they did an evaluation afterwards, and then you didn't have all that personal thing. So it's difficult to share it, because a lot of volunteers probably wouldn't want you to share it with with other people. Yeah. But like they are reflecting on their experience in the houses, and like if there's sort of issues, like I would encourage them then to talk to people in the house about the issue. Yeah.
Do they have also like individual supervisions with their house in their houses?
They do,
or
yes. Yeah. So they would have that.
So that is really alongside what the support
And
they get on the work.
they're very sort of separate. And I suppose it's come about very much like the way things have gone in Glencraig, because like, as you know, Miriam, when you were here as a co-worker, you had house parents who were supporting you, whereas now, like most of the volunteers live in the one house, and there's Causeway House, which is the main volunteering house.
Okay.
So they're sort of a lot of the social life and, like their living is there. And then I suppose it's more going to work in the houses. Yeah. So it's a very different experience to how it was years ago. Yes.
Yeah, same here. It's all moving on and developing, isn't it? Yeah. Thanks.
Anyone else have a question, a thought, a comment?
I have another one. So Vincent, this is just used for the volunteers and the employees. I'm just wondering, and I'm also not like super familiar with what you have as a setup there at Glencraig, but if if a certain constituency is doing this kind of reflective work that helps with personal growth and development and, you know, is encouraging, yeah, this kind of positive way of being in community, do you find that there can be a rub with folks who are perhaps who have been there longer or who, you know, are not doing this kind of reflective work regularly in this kind of mode or venue? Is there any kind of rub where the younger folks might be like, hey, we're doing this work, we're taking this step to kind of reflect, and or is there, and others are not? Is there ever kind of any rub with that, or does everyone in Glencraig use this tool?
No, you know, like probably a lot of people in Glencraig mightn't even be aware that it's happening. Yes, yeah. You know, like the volunteers are very aware of it, you know, and the managers are very aware, but yeah, it's something very much for the volunteers. Over the last few months, you know, like we did use it with people who are employed, because we were having a lot of people who are employed coming from outside of the UK and Ireland, and there were sort of questions, are we supporting them enough? So we first of all had a World Cafe last summer with them, and out of that then a few of them were sort of willing to do the OTM really in preparation for this conference today. Yeah, so they did it for that. It's something that could be used with people who are employed, particularly when they come, but you know, I'm not sure if that's something which the managers want to take up. I'm just looking at a few of the managers here. Yes, yeah. You know, like
what we were saying here was that we do think that could be adapted, you know, for us as well, because I think there's a lot of valuable information. There's a lot of stuff there that would be really, really good as a reflective tool. So we actually do, all the three of us that are here that would manage we see the benefits that it could be really very useful for us.
good.
And back to Miriam's comment, presumably it could be expanded, Vincent, to work with the houses and specifically homing in on the experience of the work that the volunteers do or staff do. So there could be a section. I know some of the information is personal, but presumably some of the information could just be focused on the work aspect. And the volunteers would maybe share that with the group leaders and house parents. Is that something we could consider?
Okay.
Vincent, maybe on behalf of others who are here, from your point of view, you've obviously put a lot of work into using outcomes that matter. Is there a lot of administrative and technical and time required to do this?
There is some, but it's actually quite enjoyable. And, you know, like I find it helps me to get to know the volunteers a lot better, you know, by doing it. I think if I didn't do it, I probably wouldn't get to know them so well. I'd be just taking them shopping and doing practical things and that. Yeah, so it's nice to get to know them, and you know, you have a one-to-one conversation with them. And for me, what I think is very important, it keeps alive the sort of aspect in Camphill of the sort of personal, spiritual development of the person. And, you know, like there is a danger for Glencraig and other communities, you know, focusing more on our main work, maybe caring for people with special needs, and you lose that sort of aspect, which was very important in Camphill in the past, Jim. Yeah.
Well, maybe just to practice what we've been saying, thank you, a bit of gratitude to you for all your effort and also for facilitating this workshop.
Hello, can I talk?
Yes, yeah.
Hi, everybody. I was a volunteer in Glencraig last year. And I would also want to say thank you to Vincent. I think the OTM has helped me a lot when I was a volunteer there, because I never put anything like bad, but I would share what I was feeling, like some things like I was working in the school and I wanted to learn more on how to deal with the students. And then I wrote these things there, and then Vincent would come and talk about everything I wrote there, and then he would like, okay, so here is a thing that you want to improve. Maybe you could talk to the teacher. Maybe you could talk to Emma, that is the coordinator of the school. So everything I would have put there, even though if it was a good thing or something that it could improve, Vincent would talk to me about the OTM, and he would talk to everybody, like to all the volunteers. And this was something that helped me like understand what I wanted for my experience and what I wanted after my experience. So thank you for this, Vincent.
Thank you, Carolina. That's very nice. Yeah.
Vincent, I just wondered if I could just make a comment on the outcomes matter approach itself. Because I think what's important is I just want to acknowledge you. I mean, the model itself was created primarily for children and young people who are in care situations, either in foster care or in group care. The research that it was based on is the Search Institute for Minneapolis, and they've surveyed over 6 million people, and they came up with this list of what they called 40 key developmental assets that we all need to acquire during our life journey in order to achieve a successful life. And some of the sort of correlation between the lower number of assets that we have, the more problems we're going to have in life. And it was something specific to young people, but it's designed to be used in the context of being in relationship and those connections with people. And it sort of creates that sort of 360-degree sort of feedback loop. It's also designed to be collaborative, that it isn't someone determining what your outcomes are and then writing it down. It's done in conversation. So although it was designed for those sort of care situations, it has that sort of broad appeal because those key developmental assets are universal, regardless of what stage of life we're in. And it's also cross-cultural. So, Vincent, I just want to acknowledge you in terms of the innovation of taking it out of the original context for what it was designed for and sort of making it work in other contexts as well. I think that the theory behind it has always been that we operate across multiple contexts and it's very adaptable. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Shane. I should also mention that with Shane and Leon over the last few years, I've worked quite closely adapting it because, you know, I did want to sort of make sure that, you know, Leon and Shane were sort of on board, that I wasn't creating something that was very different and that they couldn't really stand behind. Yeah.
And it's been easy to do. What I would say, there was a question about administration. What we have done, it was originally paper-based, and as people were adapting it, they had to create their own paper-based solutions because, you know, over time, particularly if you're talking about that context of looking after children and young people, there's a lot of data and what do you actually do with that. So what we've done is just spent some time creating a web-based application where the data is inputted, but it has a big back end that will manage that data for you. And so that's in the Vincent was one of the first people to come on and to actually help us test that out and to trial it and then adapt it. So yeah, administration wise, a lot more smoother than what it was previously since it was first introduced in 2012 because of that back end web-based application which can actually manage the data for you. Yeah.
Is there any other questions? Because if there isn't, there's one more slide I would like to share with you. Yeah, so I'll. So I want to take you to our Padlet site where there's lots of information about using the OTM. So here on the top left-hand corner, so this is the review that we completed in preparation for the conference. So the comments you've seen on the screen, they come from there. So for each section then, there was just comments from 5 people out of 17. So if you want to see all the comments, they're there, because, you know, I picked out comments which I felt were most relevant to this conference. I also mentioned about Steiner. So where Steiner talks about these virtues of gratitude, compassion, and responsibility, it comes mainly from this lecture in relation to Waldorf education. And then that's some information about No More Belfast mural. And then the presentation. So the presentation I've just shared with you, I'll put here on the screen. And then there's a lot of other information about the outcomes that matter in the circle of courage. Different aspects. So with this Padlet page, I usually just sort of put in things which are useful. So the ones which are most relevant are usually up at the top of the
if you're willing to share the link to that, Vincent, maybe you can paste the link into the chat.
Yeah, let's see. I'm going, okay. Just give me a minute. Can I copy that? Wait a moment. Yeah, that seems to work. Good.
That's great. John, are there any more comments, any more questions, any more thoughts on the things that Vincent has shared with us this evening? Yeah, Maria.
No, just a thank you. A thank you to Vincent and to everybody for their involvement. It was very interesting, and it left me with a lot of food for thought, and you know, where it all could be used and could be done. But so thank you very much.
Thank you, Miriam. It's lovely to see you again. Yes.
Yes, you guys too. It makes me want to come over for a visit and see the new Glencraig.
Good.
Maria, did you want to say something?
Not really, just a huge thank you, and I'm so glad to work with Vincent and with the whole team. They do an amazing job with the volunteers, and my Ecuadorian volunteers are so lucky to have that experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Beline. Beline's one of our partner organizations from Ecuador, where you're having a lot of trouble at the moment. You really need peace and kindness in Ecuador, yes, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Vincent, echo those warm words from others for the presentation and for the work that you're doing. That is concludes the final session for today, for the second day of the conference. We have a 20-minute break, and then we'll have some closing remarks from the second day here in this Zoom room. And then you're all welcome to join us again on Friday for the final day of the conference. So on that, I would say good evening.
Thank you, Antoine. Good.
Thank you.